Welcome to the Lead One podcast, where our mission is to lead leaders through leadership. The goal is to get 1% better every day. Let's see what Drew and the guys have to say.
All right, welcome back, Lead One podcast. I've got the crew with me this morning, Brandon, France, and Sam Buck. So Sam's bringing the topic to us this morning. Well, I think we got a good one. Sam, you and I were talking about this a little earlier this week. I'm gonna let you take it away.
All right, cool. So, after we talked about belongship last episode, I was actually watching a movie, right? So, I'm a big movie person, and I love movies. This particular movie is called Wolf of Wall Street. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It's a classic. Right?
Absolute classic.
Absolute classic. So, in the environments that many of us probably operate in, it's a lot of, takeaways from the movie. There's some stuff you can need to leave.
Sure.
But there's a lot of takeaways, right? So, there's one particular moment I think people don't pay attention to. When he originally lost his career and he went to Investor Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
He walked in. He didn't know what was going on. He thought it was one thing, but it was another. Well, in the midst of all that, a lot of things were said. He found out that what they were selling was called what they call penny stocks, right? Realized what his commission would be, and he immediately got to action, right?
Yeah.
Immediately got on the phones. So he got on the phones and just did what he did. He focused on what he did. And immediately, the people around him started to just stop what they were doing and try to focus on what he was doing, as in to take in that information, right? So it immediately dawned on me that his leadership didn't begin when Stratman Oatmine began. It began when he made that first phone call. So I think it kind of brought up a topic in my head of, territory and titles versus action. And I think many times as leaders, some leaders, not all, once they get a title, they often forget about the action. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A lot of people if anybody can be a supervisor, but who can be a leader? Like what does it take to be a leader? So my question to the crew is, how important is your title for real?
And I'd almost piggyback off of that and say, does it take having a title to be the leader?
So if I'm answering first, the answer is heck no.
I second that.
Yeah.
I second that.
My only argument with that, though, is in some places I think it does.
Okay.
Because depending on your position, you may be limited, right? I mean, if you're the bag loader at Delta, you could have all this great leadership quality, but you may not be in a position to be telling people what to do, right?
Right.
So I'm just saying, I think it may not necessarily be in our business per se, but I think in some circumstances, you do have to have the title first. Now, I'm not saying the title makes the leader.
Right.
So one thing that I know to be true, a friend of mine have said this for years. People are often promoted to the level of incompetence. So most jobs, you are a leader, or you are. Let's take out the word leader for a second. You're good at your job, and they promote you, and you somehow manage to figure it out, and they promote you again. They continue to promote you until you become incompetent at what you do. So how many times have you walked into a place and spoken to the person in charge, and you realize this person doesn't know what the hell he's talking about or what the hell he's doing? So in the corporate environment, that's typically the case, where I feel when it's a independent contractor position, we all have to find what motivates us to be successful. But in that level of success is where the leadership is born, I believe.
For me, I think the leadership point is about one, getting knowledge base about what it is that you're doing first. All right. So how many times have we said, and if you've worked in any corporate environment, right? there are plenty of people who I feel like are have a title or whatever, but have never done the job that they're trying to lead.
That's where I was going with it. Go ahead.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what happens is we often dismiss that because they actually haven't been through what we've been through. Now, even if they're giving us great advice, if we find out that they've never done what we do, it does kind of taint.
Yeah, like why are you even giving me advice?
You know what I mean?
Well, I have to kind of disagree with you there because I'll make it personal for myself. I've been in sales my whole life.
Okay.
You know, I'm 47 years old. I've been in sales since I was 23 years old, right out of college.
He's a Gemini.
And one of my things where it was, you know, I would always model myself or see who was the most successful person. Just so you guys know out there, originally, you know, I'm an old Wall Street vet. I started out cold calling and opening accounts on Wall Street, and what motivated me was the broker that I was working for would come to me at the end of each month and show me his paycheck. His paycheck was $20,000, $30,000, whatever it was, and he would show it to me and say, "This paycheck is because of the work that you put in. So this could be you." And that was my motivation.
Yeah.
So he led me by motivating me. But what you have to do in leading people is find out what makes them tick.
Right. But to the point that Brandon and Sam were making, that guy just didn't become a broker. Didn't he sit in the seat you were in at one point?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
that's the
Okay.
point. So
Yeah,
that's the
right.
point. So like I'm saying, a lot of times, if you haven't done the job of the people that you're leading, it's important, in my opinion, as a leader, to recognize that to the people that you're leading.
But you also have to find out the people that you're leading, what makes them tick.
I'm not talking about that. Now, of
Right.
course, that's just about leadership in general. I'm saying a lot of times people think that their leadership is based on their title. It is not.
I agree.
You know, your leadership is based on your ability to motivate people, in my opinion, your ability to get wise counsel, right? The sign of a good leader is when he puts people around him who are strong in areas that he's not, or he or she is not.
To me, a good leader is not the person who's leading. It's typically that second person, that third person who is confident enough to, like you said, put that talented person out in front.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, a good leader knows how to be a follower. They know how to be a soldier. You know what I mean? If you meet anyone who says they're a leader and has problem with leadership, they're probably not a good leader.
I was listening to a podcast. I don't want to, put people's. I don't want to name names and everything like that, but it was a similar conversation that they were having about leadership. And one thing that I took from it was, he said, a good leader is, like you said, Sam, not you leading, but finding out what your team needs and pouring into them, essentially. And by you pouring into them is what makes you a good leader. So you become their flag holder, their cheerleader. So if, Sam, you didn't meet your quota for the month or for the week, and I'm sitting, double my quota, and you need something, it's nothing for me to give that to you. Because you know what, at the end of the day, I know that, case in point, if I need it, I can count on you. It's even something simplistic down to a cup of coffee. How many times have I been in the office and I'm sitting here banging away and you show up and put a cup of coffee down on my desk? It's like, it's those little things, those little moments. You're like, damn, he took the time to think about me. And that means everything. It's the little things that you do. It's not always the grand gestures. So if I'm struggling in a particular sector or a section in my job or in life, and you come and you just give me that little tweak or that little push that I need to be better, not even to be great, but to be better. You bring value to me. And as a leader, we need to bring value to all of our people that are following us.
Well, I'll pivot on that. And I'll ask y'all a question though, because I think Franz and I have been talking too much.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
If we go back to the clip, do you think he was a leader in that moment?
I think his leadership began. I don't think he. So I think people decided in their mind.
Because it reminds me of what Franz was just saying. Is that guy that was showing you the check, was he being a leader at that moment? Did he know that's what motivated you, or did he just show you his check?
He took the time to find out what motivates me, and in that he knew that money was my motivation. Because at the end of the day, I was a broke kid coming out of college, living in a studio apartment out in Queens, New York, in a basement that was probably like 300 square feet. But I was trying to figure out how to forge my way through life. So for me, my motivation is money. So at that age, at that point in my life, it was like that's all I cared about, because I need to pay my bills or I'm going to wind up back in mommy and daddy's house. And for me, I always look at it in life as there is no going back. Once I take this step forward, there is no going back. That's how I live my life, my creed, my model. So he knew that money was my motivation. So because of that, he motivated me by showing me what I brought to the table and building that confidence in me by showing me his paycheck to show me that without me, this wouldn't have happened.
So my question to y'all.
Yeah, we're way off the question.
My question to y'all is, it's two questions, really. First question is, does territory ignite action, or does action end up giving you territory? That's the first question.
I think the answer is yes to both of them. Sometimes you could push someone into a position, and then they be up for the challenge, and they become whoever they need to become for that position. And sometimes someone can outgrow whatever position they're in and have to get pushed into the next position.
I'm gonna ask you. Tell me what you mean when you say territory.
Title, like, what are you over? Like, so if you are instantly put over something, does that mean all of a sudden I need to do action?
I think most people will rise to the occasion. I've always been told nobody was typically ever ready for the promotion. There's no way you can be fully prepared for whatever that next responsibility is. So some of it is figuring it out. So I think sometimes giving people the title first causes them to then step up. I mean, that's not foolproof, but Sam, to your original question of what makes the leader, title or action, I did just a little bit of research, and one of the things that I read was that leadership is evolving. In fact, the definition of leadership changes every 2 years. And so I think if we think back on this question, I think if we back up 30 or 40 years, it was all about the title.
I think so.
And I'm not trying to put everybody into one category, but then it was a lot about title, didn't really matter about the action. But then when you look at today, having millennials in the workplace, the title, I think, doesn't matter to a lot of people anymore. And where this was evident to me, so my wife is in healthcare. Obviously, that entire sector is facing a lot of challenges at the moment. And she said there were times that she didn't feel valued or didn't feel appreciated, and she said, I'll take a whole lot less money to feel valued and appreciated.
Exactly.
I mean,
Which goes back to what I was saying. You have to take time to know the people who are following you or working with you. It could be a coworker, it could be your boss, or the opposite way, it could be your boss needing to have a better understanding of the person who he's working for. Truly, everybody here is a leader, but if you don't take the time to understand what it is that's making this person come to work every day, then are you really leading, or are you just pushing your agenda on them?
Well, I think even before that, find what everyone has value. Like I think you talking about a clip, and Jim actually showed it to us yesterday. It was Ernie Johnson talking about value,
yeah. It's a good
right? It's a great clip. But everybody has value, right? He talks about how everyone has value. I think sometimes the first actionable step is to quickly, what does that person see as their value? What do you see as their value? And to communicate that to them. Hey, look, you're valuable in this way. So immediately, sometimes we try to fix what's wrong first instead of focusing on what's great first. And I think leadership first is about building people up, right? And the more you build them up through that action, they're going to get better at the things they're not as great at.
Right. Workplace Trends did a survey that said nearly 50% of workers said they believe leadership is the empowerment of others and have high expectation from their leaders.
Absolutely.
And in fact, they don't mind leaving a job if the leader fails to meet their expectation.
Absolutely.
And it goes on to say this daringness is definitely calling for some serious leadership change in today's day and age.
Absolutely.
Well, no one stays on a job anymore for 20 years and gets to go watching a toaster, right? Like those days are over.
Unless there's some belongship.
Unless
built
there's
in.
some, right, that and ownership. But at the end of the day, the average person, millennial, their career span in particular, usually in a job, not necessarily their career, but in a particular job, so on average maybe 5 years, and then they're moving on to something else. So the true question is, why is it that back then, our parents were in a job for 30 yees, where the average person in our generation is on a job 5 years?
Right.
So is it because they're not leaving the industry, they may be making a lateral move. So why did they make that lateral move? Was it because of money? Was it because of leadership?
I think leadership or management is the sole reason people stay or leave jobs, in my opinion.
What was that? Because of what?
The sole reason that people either stay or leave.
You said it was management?
Was management or leadership or whatever, however you want to call it. You know what I mean? Because most times people have other things going on, but usually if they don't click with whoever's leading them, that's usually what happens. Now, I will say this. Now, this is my other side of that question is, when you're trying to do these actionable steps, obviously, I'll be honest, title is important to me, but I feel like the action is the mainstay. So, like, the title is, okay, this solidifies something, but the action is the thing that kind of carries you over to be better. You know what I'm saying? Sets you apart. So my question is, in all that, what type of person is the most difficult to lead? What are you challenged with the most to lead?
It depends on how you approach it. If you're approaching it as, like what Franz said earlier, this is my dream, this is my vision, and that person that's difficult to lead has their own dream and vision, that person's going to be the most difficult to lead because he want to be a leader himself. Sometimes you need them people that's more harmonious in your team, more than the dude that's going to be a leader.
Well, I think the hardest person to lead is the person that doesn't care about the team. Yeah. So maybe they're selfish, and typically that person is not a very coachable person. So if they don't care about what the goal is or the overall objective of the team, that person's pretty difficult to wrangle in. And to your second question, you may not be able to lead them.
That's a fact.
I mean, it's
So
listen.
what do you
It takes no talent to fire somebody, right?
It doesn't.
But not everybody's always the right fit. So I think sometimes as a leader, you have to identify when this person is just they're not on the bus with you.
So at what point do you throw in the towel on that particular person, and what do you do in the interim to try to help them to get them on board?
That's a good question because I think I'm going through. Well, I've been with my team, been going through people that don't care about the team. They just either too young. Maybe I'm gathering them up too young, and and they just are focused on whatever they got going on and not focused on building this team up.
So the question is for you is what are their interests? Did you take time to find out what they're interested in, or are you trying to push your agenda on them?
Willie D. His interest was Willie D. And that's it.
Right.
Okay.
No, keep going.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I
So
want to hear more about that, what you were talking about.
yeah, so I actually was waiting for you to answer the question because I do need advice on when to move on from somebody that don't have the same vision or don't have the team in mind, and it's difficult to leave.
Well, I think specifically in regards to our business, it is a must when they become toxic. Our CEO said that there's a seat on the bus for everybody. Now, that particular person's seat may be at the back of the bus. So, but at the point that they're hurting you, then that's where the line is drawn. And then once again, it becomes, where do you focus your time and energy? Is it the person who's sitting at the front of the bus right behind the driver, or who's way at the back? So it's not to say necessarily that they can't be a part of the team to some degree, but you have to realize I've got to move on with my time and effort.
And I was going to say, I think that's good for me, because my problem is with the actionable steps is that when I care, I care. You feel what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I don't want to let that thing go. Like, I feel like I can always, I can turn them around. I can teach them this. And then I don't know if you all, everyone's read that book, Who Moved My Cheese? But it talks about making sure you know when to move on. And the hardest thing to do is move on from something you're invested in. You know what I mean? For whatever reason.
Or someone you see potential in.
Yeah, so if you see more potential in the person than they see in themselves,
right,
sometimes that's the hardest person to move on from, because you see what they could be.
Right.
And I think as leaders, sometimes a part of our action with our title is also knowing when to stop giving that action.
You know, there's a phrase I've heard a lot in regards to our business that says, some will, some won't, so what? Who's next? And so I think that's what you got to identify, right? Who will and who won't.
That's difficult though, because you Sam, like you said, you got you become emotionally attached to this situation, and you want it to work. And when you get to that point of caring, like you said, the warning signs tend to go missed, because you're coming at it from a heartfelt situation, and you feel that you can make this better. And that goes for personal relationships and business relationships. How many times we've had that girlfriend, and by the time we get out of that, we say, man, I was in that way longer than I should have stayed.
I feel like every time you didn't marry that person and live happily ever after, it's a waste of time. Almost.
Yeah, but you got to go through it.
So, call to action. A couple things I've got, and I got these from Richard Branson. But he said there's three things that make a good leader along the context of action versus title. One of those, communication and listening. I think we've obviously talked about that today. And then Sam, to what you just mentioned, that employee first mentality. I think that's what we're talking about, is when you're more invested in them than they are themselves, which is a good trait as a leader, but at some point the line has to be drawn, right? And then the other one I thought was interesting, number 3, was failure. To quote him, is, do not be embarrassed by your failures, learn from them and start again. And I think we talked about this in episode 1 just a little bit, but I think that's part of your team has to see that you're human and that you make mistakes, and more importantly, you acknowledge that was a mistake. Exactly. And that I messed up. And I think when the team sees that if you're willing to take that risk and acknowledge it,
why not?
What's their excuse, right?
Exactly.
And I'll finish with a quote that I read from Robin Sharma that says, leadership is not about title or a designation. It's about impact, influence, and inspiration. Impact involves getting results. influence is about spreading the passion you have for your work, and you have to inspire teammates and customers.
If you got 1% of value from this podcast, do us a favor. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Tell your friend, tell your coworker. Until we meet again. Lead one.